She never moved in life. But the painting, that's different. Let's begin with the quiet things. The ones folded in fabric, stored behind glass, watched more than they're ever understood. Tell me, where does this find you tonight? What hour leans against your window now? Soft and listening. Is the room still? Good. Then we may begin. Every story has its right. Ours is older than it should be. One they used to whisper, only once a child was gone. The brush over silence, a ritual of stillness, a final kindness. Paint over the eyes, before sorrow forgets to look away. They said it was mercy. They said the spirit would rest, but memory doesn't always obey the brush. The portrait hangs in the western hall, second floor. Past the velvet rope no one respects. Past the plaque no one reads anymore. You'll know it when you see it. The frame is thick with gilded grief. And if you lean close, closer than you should, you'll catch the faint scent of almonds, lingering in the varnish. That's where this story begins. Closer than you should have gotten. I'm the one who dusts the frames. No one asks about. Caretaker of the forgotten gallery, archivist of names folded too tightly to open. And once a month, on the same night they once blacked the mirrors, I walk the hall and clean the children's portraits by hand. Not for the visitors, not for the light, for the silence, if you've ever walked through a house. That remembers who you used to be. You know how the walls lean in. You know how the doors don't quite breathe, the way they used to. And how a painting, if left alone long enough, will start listening back, especially hers. The child in the portrait. No one remembers her name. Elise? Eliza? Something soft with an L. But the record only says, died in sleep, eyes sealed in oil, frame delivered. Spring, 1902. It was custom back then, when a child died suddenly. A fever, a fall, a name that ended too soon. They had one chance to preserve what was left. A portrait, paint the likeness. Then glaze the eyes, not to erase, to hush. The dead should not gaze. That's what they believed. Because the gaze might still remember. She was painted before the thaw, but something in the glaze has begun to melt. That's what I saw. That's what I shouldn't have seen. Last week the cloth caught on the lower edge. It was a gentle stroke, routine, but something pulled. A spot of resistance, sticky. And when I leaned in, I saw it. Her left eye was not shut. Not exactly. Not anymore. You know the feeling, don't you? When you touch something colder than the rest of the room. Not cold like air. Cold like breath that left just moments ago. The varnish had receded. Just a little. Enough for a shimmer to push through. Glass or gaze. I couldn't tell. But something behind that paint was looking back. Some say oils can yellow. Some say time softens grief. But this wasn't age. It was unveiling. A child's gaze, slowly brushing off its burial. Notice what she doesn't say here. There's no artist signature, no initials, no name, just the frame and the silence. The docents walk by with their lanterns. Tour groups pause at the more tragic canvases. But I linger, always hers. And last night, when the backup lights flickered on after a short outage, I swear the room was unchanged, but she was different. The angle of her neck, still, but the eye, brighter, fixed, watching. If you've ever wondered whether something left behind could still call your name, you'd understand why I turned, without cleaning the last frame, why I left the door ajar, why I haven't returned this evening. Some said the brush over was sacred, that it protected the living and sealed the dead. But I don't think she wants to stay sealed anymore. And I don't think that varnish was ever meant to last. There's something the staff won't touch. They clean around it, pretend not to glance. Even the guide with the practiced smile walks a little quicker when her frame comes into view. They'd never say it aloud, but the portrait feels awake now. When I passed her again, 2 nights after the glaze changed, I saw it. Both eyes. Both. If you've ever noticed when something familiar stops behaving the way it always has, you'll understand what I felt. It wasn't just the shape of the eyes. It was the focus. No longer blank, but selective. Fixed. Not like a painting. Not like memory. Like intention. She was watching the mirror across the hall. No one ever stops to think about that mirror. But it reflects the hallway from behind her, not her directly. Just the shadows that pass behind her frame. And the reflection was wrong. I knew it before I turned. I stared too long. Let the silence drape across my shoulders like it used to in the chapel. That mirror should have shown the portrait's back. But there was movement. Something else, a shape that lingered just beyond the frame. Until I blinked and it was gone. She doesn't answer right away. That silence, it changes everything. I stepped closer. Foolish. But I needed to know. I raised the lantern, and the light caught something beneath the glaze. Another layer. A fainter image, painted over the first. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. A second face, softer, eyes open, smiling, but too wide. That's when I understood. The portrait we've all seen, the one glazed over with grief and dust, wasn't the first. It was painted over. They had tried to replace her expression. Try again. Seal her better. Some say one painting can silence the soul. Others say it takes 3. It was a belief once, here, in the old quarters, that a soul unsettled would shift its likeness. Until the painting stopped lying. It's in the margins of the housekeeping ledger, just beneath a line about beeswax polish. Let them paint again if it won't hold. Some faces crack. I stepped back, not out of fear. Out of apology. What if she wasn't trying to haunt us? What if she was just trying to be remembered correctly? You might have noticed this before. That some portraits don't look the same twice. And maybe it's not your mind. Maybe it's theirs. Notice what changes here. Not the portrait itself, but the hallway around it. The wallpaper peels at shoulder height. The crown molding curls. A moth nest forms where the gas lamp once hissed. Decay moves toward her, not away, like the room has stopped trying to preserve itself. The varnish had pooled again. But this time it shimmered, with the shape of her breath. That's the only way I can describe it. A fogged glass without warmth. Some nights, the glaze catches things. Not just dust, not just my reflection, but movement. Software shifting, as though she blinks, just as you look away. I considered calling someone, a curator, the foundation, even the night docent with the too tight gloves. But what would I say? Her eyes are open again. Her reflection doesn't match. They'd lock the gallery, scrape her clean, archive her with the others, and she'd vanish. Again. So instead, I stood in the dark and whispered her name. I didn't know it, not really, but I tried them all. Elise, Eliza, Eloise, until the air grew still and the varnish stopped moving. That night I left a candle burning on the sill across the hallway. No flame, just the melted stub. She deserved something. Even if it was small, even if it was foolish. Some said a portrait was like a lock. Once sealed, the soul could rest. But others, they said the soul only waits for someone foolish enough to ask what was underneath. Would you have looked closer? Would you have called her name? The gallery was colder the third time. Not just draft cold, still cold, the kind of quiet. That feels like it's been left out too long, hung up in the rafters, waiting for a name. If you've ever entered a room that remembered you before you arrived, you know the way the door pulls differently, how the silence adjusts itself, how you walk softer, even when you're alone. This time, I didn't bring the lantern. I wanted to see her, the way she wanted to be seen. No glare, no light, just shadow, and shape, and oil, and time. That's when I saw it. Not her eyes. They were already watching, already expectant. It was her mouth. It had changed. Not a smile, not a frown, just opened, slightly. A softness where there was once closure. A breath beginning without lungs. She lights the candle, but never looks at it. That's what changed, I think. The records still say. The portrait was completed in one sitting. Spring 1902, 2 days after the child's death. Final seal applied within the week. But this wasn't part of the seal. There was no brush stroke, no pigment, no line to trace. Her mouth wasn't painted. I stepped closer. I let my shadow rest across her chest, just beneath the soft fold of her collar. The air behind me didn't stir, but the air around her did. Like something exhaled from under the glass. The mirror behind me was dark now, refusing reflection, but I didn't need it. I was watching her directly. I was past denial. That's when the voice came. Not a sound, not at first. A feeling. You know the way your chest tightens when someone says your name from behind a door. Softly, like they're unsure if you're still listening. That's what it felt like, only it didn't say my name. It said hers. Eliza. Elise. Liza. It tried each one, like a child whispering to the dark, to see which name echoes back. You remember the silence. The one from the bell tower. This felt like that, only thicker, lower, like something trying to finish, a sentence that was never begun. I turned toward the hallway. No one. The tour group wouldn't be back for hours. The cameras had long since stopped recording after hours. Budget cuts. I'd requested that once. Fewer eyes. She should not have had a mouth. Not an open one. Not anymore. But the varnish had peeled away, the way a scab lifts when something underneath refuses to stay buried. And that's when I saw the scratch. Just beneath her chin, barely visible unless the moonlight reached across the floorboards. A thin curve, not accidental, not decorative. A crescent, like a smile, was once carved there, then wiped away. It matched something I read once. In the old funeral books, the ones kept behind lock and shelf. A note on symbolic silencing. If the child must not speak, seal the lips beneath the brush. But if the silence breaks, let the mouth remain ajar, so the memory may pass through. Some said this practice was outlawed. Others said it was never practiced at all, but I saw the brush line, or what was left of it, and I saw how it cracked. Would you have stepped closer? Would you have reached up and touched the frame, just to be sure it hadn't moved? I didn't. I stepped back, then forward again, then stayed, because it felt like. If I left too quickly, she'd forget who I was. Or worse, remember. She doesn't blink, but she breathes now. That's how the oil settles on the glass. Like something warm beneath the varnish is preparing to speak. The hallway wallpaper curled again last night, peeling in a perfect vertical line from crown to baseboard, as if something long and narrow pressed against it from the other side. And this morning, the mirror is gone, taken down. No note, no tools, no explanation. Just 4 empty hooks in the wall and a thin line of dust where the frame used to rest. No one asked me about it. No one noticed. No one ever does. But her mouth is still parted. Just slightly, just enough to let the varnish flicker when the air moves wrong. It started with my sleeve. The cuff brushed the frame as I leaned in to fix the gallery plaque. Just a small motion, the kind you forget. But I didn't, because when I pulled back, my wrist was wet. Not paint, not water, not wax. It was cold and clear and clinging, like something that wasn't supposed to move had done so anyway. If you've ever reached into a basin, long after someone else washed their hands, you know that feeling. Residual warmth without presence. This was the opposite. Presence without warmth. I didn't finish fixing the plaque. I wiped my sleeve against the gallery curtain and told myself it was dew, but there's no dew in a sealed hallway. And the varnish doesn't move, not unless it's still drying. But that seal was over 100 years old, wasn't it? They used to believe that if grief wasn't spoken aloud, it would ferment inside the body, settle in the lungs, catch behind the eyes, make the breath heavy, make the dreams forgettable. But if it did escape, it would reach for the one who tried to hold it back. I had been holding her back. Not with ropes, not with chains, with routine, with dusting, with ignorance disguised as reverence. The next time I entered the gallery, I didn't check the doors. I didn't sign the night log. I didn't even turn on the lights. I just walked right to her. And this time, I heard it. It wasn't a whisper, not the way people describe these things. It was more like the sound of a memory, exhaling from the wrong lungs. Dry, rhythmic, measured. Notice what she doesn't do here. She doesn't look at me. Not directly. She looks at where I'll be next. 2 steps ahead. That's when I knew. I was no longer the caretaker. I was the kept. The gallery walls had changed. It wasn't the color, it was the corners. They bent inward, not physically, but perceptually. I could feel them rounding toward her frame, making the space small, private, personal. She was trying to tell me something, but not in words. I sat down, on the bench I once told visitors not to touch, and I waited and waited, and then the varnish blinked, just once. Not her. Not her eyes, the varnish itself. A ripple, like a breath across water. A second of motion, then stillness again. It should have terrified me, but I felt calm, not safe, not peaceful, just understood. Like whatever she was, she knew what I had done. If you've ever kept a secret too long and felt it press against your ribs in the shape of someone else's name, you know what I mean. Some called this the third unsealing, a forgotten belief from the century's turn when portraits were painted over the same canvas 3 times. Once for the likeness, once for the spirit, and once for the family's lie. The third layer wasn't meant to hold, it was meant to soften, slowly, until what was denied leaked through. The more you looked, the faster it softened. She closes the drawer with both hands this time. That's when I knew she was done searching. I left the gallery without touching anything, but my hands were still sticky when I locked the staff door behind me. And they smelled, not of almonds anymore, but of old cloth, of children's books, of air left behind in a room, no longer lived in. She'd changed me, not with fear, with weight. She'd placed something in me, like a name I wasn't supposed to carry, but did. Would you have listened? If the frame breathed, would you have stayed? If the breath matched your own? Some said it happened once before, long before the plaque was engraved, before the wing was sealed for structural reasons, before the paint dried. But no one remembered who she was. Only that the room had to be closed, and the frame burned. There's a drawer in the registrar's office. That sticks when the air turns cold. The key has a leather tag with no initials. Just the number 27. Inside is a file I wasn't meant to find. If you've ever opened something that smelled like someone else's memory, you know how paper can breathe. The folder was too thin for a child's death. No autopsy, no baptismal notice, no name, only 3 sheets, and a tracing, charcoal on vellum. A faint outline of a girl's face, half smiling, half erased. At the bottom, unfit for display, canvas rejected, frame splintered. The frame. It always comes back to the frame. I went back to the gallery that night. With the file pressed under my coat, I wanted to compare. To be sure. To tell myself the sketch was different. It wasn't. It was her. The same shape of the jaw, the same fold in the collar, only her mouth was wider. Smiling fully. Too fully. And then I remembered what they used to say. In the houses built before photography, if the face returns smiling, seal the door behind it. The varnish had pooled again, this time on the outside. Just a bead clinging to the bottom right corner of the frame. It shouldn't have passed through the glass, but it had. And it pulsed. Once, then still. Notice what isn't written in the file. There's no artist listed, no patron, no date. Only this scrawled in red along the top margin, "Do not let her be painted again." But she was, wasn't she? Painted again and again, until even the silence couldn't hold her. There's a theory. You won't find it in the museum literature, but it's whispered during conservation training that some canvases are receptive, not haunted, not cursed, just absorbent, that a child lost too suddenly can leave behind an imprint, stronger than the oil meant to contain her. And if you try to trap it, the image will settle into the next thing with a name, a portrait, a mirror, a person. She used to walk with purpose. But tonight, she drifts. Maybe so should you. I closed the file and tucked it into my own pocket, not the drawer. And I left a copy in its place, a tracing of my own, not of her, of me, just in case. Would you have opened it? Would you have looked at the sketch, knowing it might look back differently next time? The gallery has changed again. There are scratches now, at the base of the frame. Not vandalism, not from a visitor, from the inside, as if someone or something pressed their nails outward before deciding to wait again. Some say the painting process, if done too soon after death, could confuse the soul. Make it think the canvas was the body, and when the mourners moved on, the soul stayed, trapped, hungry, remembering. You don't believe that, do you? You don't think the brush was used too soon? The curator avoids the West Wing now. She says the air is damp, that the dehumidifier is failing, that it must be mildew. But she never looks at the portrait. Not directly, not anymore. I walk by it every evening, not to clean, not to pray, just to let her see me, so she knows someone stayed. The hallway is quieter now, not just at night, always. Even the floorboards hesitate. Even the hinges breathe slower. And no one speaks in front of her frame anymore. I don't wipe the glass these days. I don't light the lantern. I don't close the curtains. She prefers the moonlight, if you've ever tried to forget something that remembered you back. You know this kind of stillness. It isn't peace. It's settling, like dust, choosing where to rest. She hasn't moved again. Not that I've seen. But the varnish no longer reflects. It absorbs. Light goes in and doesn't come out. Some say the portrait is cursed. Others say it's a blessing. But none of them say her name. Not anymore. You might have heard of it now. The girl with the unpainted mouth. The varnish that weeps. The file with no date. They come and go, the visitors. But I stay, not out of duty, not out of fear. I stay because someone must remember her, as she was before the third layer dried. She watches still, but not with hunger, not with malice, with memory. There's something I haven't told you, something I've kept because I wasn't ready to say it aloud. The original portrait, the first layer, it's not gone. I saw it last night, just faintly. In the corners of the canvas, the brush lines are different, sharper, more urgent. She was painted reaching, one hand out, the other gripping something. Not a doll, not a flower, a latch. Notice what she doesn't say here. Not help me, not go, just here. The lockbox in the registrar's office is missing now. File 27 is gone, but I didn't take it. She did, or maybe she no longer needs it. Some said the painting would vanish once seen. Others claimed it would follow the one who looked longest. But she's still here, framed, lit by nothing but moon and breath. Watching, not waiting, not anymore. Tonight I left a candle at the base of her frame, unlit, new, just in case. And when I closed the gallery door, I heard the varnish tighten, just once, like paint drying over the truth. For the final time, if you've ever wondered whether the dead remember who touched them last, you're not alone. There's nothing else to do tonight but drift. You're safe now. Sleep well. I'll be here. When the lights go low again, maybe you've seen her too. Maybe not in paint, maybe not in galleries, but in the places we cover too quickly, in the faces we file away, before they've finished blinking. Some silences are chosen, some are inherited, and some are just waiting to open their mouths.